Hey everybody, welcome back to The Pressing Matters. I'm Scott. Thank you for tuning in today. Thank you for your support. Today I'm super excited to tell you about the Atlantic 75 reissue of Genesis, selling England by the pound. I've compared it to three other pressings that I had on hand. I have them here. The first is a UK pressing from 1975. That I purchased in probably 79. A great sounding record at the time. I always thought it was beautiful. This is Classics 33, also mastered by Chris Bellman. Opening up the window on the music, a bit more clarity and dynamics and bass impact. And the EMI 100. The quietest of all of them, but has a cool clinical clarity that I don't care for. It misses the more lush sound of the original pressing. I'm going to cut to the chase because each of these has their issues. I made extensive liner notes, and I just don't feel like it's necessary. I want to get to the good news. And the good news is this is the ultimate edition of selling England by the pound. No question, no question. This is not hyperbole. This is not just excitement over a new pressing. This is fact. This is physical. This is opening up the record because of the 45 format and the much more space available. This record has the lowest distortion of any of them. Paired with the quiet pressing, you're hearing things that you've never heard before. But one thing about this I want to talk about, it's not the kind of increase in detail that you get from other mastering companies. I won't mention who, but one that tends to tweak up the top to emphasize detail. It's not that. This is opening up the record, providing an extremely quiet playing surface, and allowing the low-level detail to expand in the mid-range and the bass. It's a different approach, and the top end still retains its lovely character without sounding bright or harsh. It gives the record power and drama in the moments it needs. It gives it delicacy and intricacy in the moments that are required. So, for instance, the vocal that opens the album, Dancing Out on the Moonlit Night. I played it on all of them. It always sounds pretty good. On here, it's arresting how clear it is. I played this and my roommate was in another room and he was like, "Are you singing?" And I was like, "No, that is a record." He goes, "My God, it sounds like you're in the room singing." I was like, "Oh, okay." Yeah, it's like that. It should have in the room kind of presence and startling clarity. It does here, and it comes out of the darkness perfectly. It's so quiet, and the trail off of reverb or echo on his voice is probably the longest I've heard on any of these. It's a feature that you'll notice right away when you listen to that. The part where Peter's saying the captain leads his dance right out through the night on Dancing Out with the Moonlit Night has a moment that's very crucial at the beginning of the record. It's where bass and mellotron combine to create an effect, and it should have gravity and air. So it's kind of like really deep bass and this angelic chorus up here. And this is another thing I noticed about this record in particular, this 45, is the mellotron choruses, when they're used, are so effective because they float up here. Whereas in earlier pressings, it's not quite as clear It's sort of like a blend of sound in the middle. Doesn't have that height and space separation that this does. It's quite amazing to hear. The bass notes are much more distinct. Mike Rutherford's bass is easier to follow. The drums are more present but never pushed out. I mean, they vary throughout the album, but so many little touches like little cymbal taps and things are so audible here. It's just a revelation to hear it with such low distortion. This snarling synthesizer that starts, I Know What I Like. That's supposed to give you the impression of a lawnmower, because they talk about a lawnmower in the song. And it's very, very effective on here. It wraps around you in a 3D way. It feels like very dark and mysterious and ominous. Beautiful, beautiful. And the compression that you hear on the choruses of I Know What I Like is not here like that. It's much more open, it has more space to breathe, and it sounds more natural, and you can really pick out everything in the complex music that's going on as well. What I thought was kind of a simple song really has so much going on, and you really hear it all here. It's great. Fifth of Firth. This is the only side that was recut by Chris Bellman. The other three sides used the original plates from the Classic Records edition that was never released. I didn't notice any difference in sound quality between the sides. I was afraid once I heard that that was done that this would stick out, but for whatever reason he was able to match the EQ of the original plates, and it sounds consistent throughout. Fifth of Firth has a piano intro that is so interesting and never has been rendered as clearly as on here with such natural tone. The earlier ones kind of have a little, some of them have a little bit of distortion on the piano strikes. This is lush and beautiful. Everything is clearly articulated but never accentuated in a way that is offensive or a little too much. It's so interesting how Tony is using two hands probably to create this tension where one line is going up, the chords are going down, and it creates a gravity and a tension that is so impressive on this to start out that album, start out that song. Also on this, the proper bass weight for the beginning of the song as the music kicks in is really important. I'm not talking about the climaxes, I'm just talking about in general. Hearing the song anchored down with a proper bass is really important. That works really well on here as well. So let's get to what makes or breaks this album, in my opinion. The guitar solo and climaxes of Fifth of Firth. So there's a muted guitar solo meandering through, Steve Hackett, of course, and synthesizers kind of guiding it along, and it brings it up to this climax. This is the most ecstatic sound on record, in my opinion. It never fails to thrill me. It does on the other pressings as well, but not like on this. This when you hear that deep Taurus bass pedal and soaring guitar solo, again, it's another one of those moments that creates this tension that's just like so overwhelming and so powerful and majestic. You got to hear that like loud. And this pressing can be turned up loud with not any of the distortion that you'll get on the earlier pressings. It's the most thrilling thing I've ever heard, and it's rendered so cleanly and clearly on this with a wonderful, wonderful sense of presence, of depth, and majesty. It's like the opening of the gates of heaven. It's just beautiful, beautiful. Wow. Wow. So, Fifth of Earth was an unqualified success. Just for that, it's worth it. But the rest of the album is done so well as well. The closing track is More Fool Me. That was Phil Collins' vocal solo, just with the guitars. And the guitars are rendered so clearly and cleanly and delicately with natural tone. Phil's voice sounds fragile and beautiful. And this particular track gives you less distortion overall than the earlier pressings, because it's at the end of the side on earlier pressings. The Battle of Epping Forest, very interesting. This is a song that I kind of liked, but would always bypass it in favor of the two big showpieces, Fifth of Earth and Cinema Show. I thought it was curious and interesting, a little too British for me, maybe. I don't know. But Peter Gabriel goes through a multitude of voices on this, and that was what always stuck out to me on this track. It starts with a very cool little fife and drum band coming in, and really it's rendered so well on this. It's striking how it comes from the distance and moves to the side with beautiful fidelity, much, much better than any of the earlier pressings. When the music starts, now this is where I would focus on Peter Gabriel, and I still do, but on this pressing, the music takes on a life of its own. It has presence, it has depth, it has intricacy that's all being heard for the first time, in my opinion. I've never heard it like that. I've never been so riveted to this song, and it was because of examining the complex music that's going on, and I was blown away how good Battle of Epping Forest sounded. The vocal things going on are fun and really interesting. The clarity on his voice is excellent too. And when I'm talking about clarity, I'm not talking about top end. I'm talking about open mid-range and low distortion and low noise floor that just brings out so much more. It's a thrill. It's a thrill to listen to. And let's go to the climax of the album. There is an instrumental as well in here, but the climax of the album is the Cinema Show. Starting out with gorgeous light guitar, acoustic guitar, bells and chimes from Phil, and gorgeous vocal from Peter Gabriel, probably his best on the album. The climax on this, as the music gets going, is keyboard runs up to the heavens and a thrilling choral effect and bass impact. Again, the Taurus bass pedals are used in this, and it's just so thrilling on this album. Just amazing. It's always been a great track, but it's never sounded quite as beautiful as on this. And I gotta stress, this is really beautiful. It's not hyper detailed. It has much more detail and much more low-level information, but it's still lush and beautiful. And that's the magic of this pressing. The end of the album is Isle of Plenty. Peter says, "Watch the deadly nightshade grow." And that is the end of the album. It's just so striking to hear him come back and say those words, and it just gives you this eerie just thrill, like you've just been through the most beautiful experience ever. I can't say enough good about this. There's volume of notes, but they really don't matter at this point. This is the edition of this album, no question. I hope if you have it, you'll leave a comment in the comment section. I hope you enjoyed this review of Selling England by the Pound. I'm so looking forward to the rest of them. You can be sure I'm going to cover all of them. And until next time, I'm Scott for the Pressing Matters. Have a great day.